Happy Monday, and welcome to Liquid Next Daily Devotions. We have reached a part of Matthew that is heavily debated and carefully examined and has caused a considerable amount of concern among Christians throughout church history. But today, I want to bring you clarity, peace, and hope that will encourage you to continue on your mission of Christ in your life. Our text today comes from Matthew 24, where the disciples approached Jesus, asking for clarity about the coming judgment and the destruction of the temple. We'll begin reading in 29. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then will appear the signs of the Son of Man in heaven. And then all of the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that the summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. The first thing I would like to point out is in verse 29. Jesus actually steals this heavenly body imagery from Isaiah, where it is used to illustrate God's judgment of the nations. One thing that we often overlook as modern readers is the significance of the imagery to the listeners of Jesus. Let's break this down using baseball terms. For example, if you're playing in the field, say playing second base, and there's a runner on first, and you look over to the third base coach and he's giving the runner signs. And as you look in, you try to pick out the signs and decipher them through what your team uses. But as you leave, you're left with several interpretations of what he's trying to tell the base runner. Is he trying to tell him to steal, or is he trying to communicate something to the hitter? And that's the same thing that I felt when I first read this passage. I was like, cool, there's visual signs for the second coming of Jesus. However, for the original listeners, because they would have diligently studied Isaiah, this heavenly imagery would have been understood as God judging those in power, making Jesus' prediction of God's judgment on the Jewish leaders and people for their rejection of Jesus, unrepentance, and hypocrisy as the Lord's people, is the temple's destruction, known as the abomination that causes desolation, talked about back in verse 15. That happens in 70 AD by the Romans, which Jesus would accurately predict in verse 34, and significant message for the disciples to wrap their heads around for what is to come. What we must learn from the Jewish leaders is this: to see and believe in who Jesus says he is, the Messiah, the Son of God, who came and died for our sins, rose, defeating death, and is seated at the right hand of the Father, reigning in glory. The next thing I would like to point out comes from verse 34, which includes the word elect. This word has caused a great deal of worry and doubt in my life, stemming from a doubt about the security of my eternal salvation, as well as in many believers who came before us because of its use in Calvinist belief, communicating that God predestined or set apart an unknown group of people who will make it into heaven. However, I believe that God, in his infinite wisdom, will know who and who will not come to know him in the end. Yet, God's salvation is not a limited invitation. As Jesus instructed the disciples in the Great Commission, as they were tasked with making disciples of all nations. And John, the opening of his gospel, will compound this by stating this: He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did not receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. There's so much more to explore in this passage, but to conclude our time today, I would like to encourage you to rest securely, knowing that through your faith, you have been counted as a child of God. And when the trumpets blow and Jesus comes in glory, we can have confidence in knowing that will be gathered to him. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.